Hi, this is Amanda.
And this is Jen.
And you're listening to Just This, a podcast that explores everything around being and becoming a mother or parent.
We're excited to have you join us as we dive into the practical details as well as the unseen energetics on topics that span from preconception to years after birth.
All right. So this week we're going to talk about the first week after having a baby. I thought we should do the first month, but Jen is very focused on the first week. So we are going to talk about week one.
Week one. Do you remember week one?
Yeah. And part of the reason I wanted to pull it back more was because I was in the hospital most of week one because of my baby being so small. But there is, I think regardless, there's so many shifts that happen during week one. And for some reason, I think that is, I don't know about you, it's the easiest week to remember. Like, it's like that week was very clear to me compared to like everything else just starts to mush together.
For sure. I agree. I agree to that for sure. Yeah. I guess we could extend it out a little bit, but a month is so.
We'll start with week one.
Yeah.
We'll start with week one. We'll start with week one. We have done another conversation on the fourth trimester, which was a more broad picture and importance of the fourth trimester. But yes, week one, let's just see where we go from there and then we can start that. What was your inspiration to do week one?
Well, I think the big inspiration is like just going to visit mamas and the first week and families really, because usually there's support there too. But just like visiting families and how there's like this sense of excitement, right? Like because they just had a baby less than 7 days ago. And then also like this sense of like, I think that we just don't know what to expect in the first week or really like what is the best thing to do to like optimize that first week home. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah. I think what I see the biggest thing is when you come back to that excitement is it's almost like you don't realize you're in a marathon.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to just be like, I'm going to jump back in or everything's great. Like baby's sleeping wonderfully. Like, yeah, baby is sleeping pretty good that first week. The other big thing I see people struggle with in this first week, and I think you would have a lot of wisdom to speak around this, is that weight drop that baby has and how the medical field approaches this and the importance of bringing baby's weight back up, but also the pressure that mama feels in that first week of the baby needs to gain weight, and mom adjusting and trying to produce and also I guess that adjustment to baby being on boob all the time. Yes. Like we've mentioned in the post calls. So I don't know if any of that.
Yeah. And I definitely also want to like revisit too that like the first week either home, but sometimes baby is in the hospital or mom is in the hospital too. So I just think that like first week is very memorable, like you said, but also sometimes not as delicious for everyone. Right. But yeah, I agree with the whole, so going back to your kind of point here about mom and baby and the gaining the weight, I mean, that's such a big thing. And I feel like it is a lot of pressure that we put on baby because we want, and mom really, because we want to see baby gain weight. But then if you're a first time mom, you really don't get milk coming in for about 2 to 3 days and more commonly day 3. And so you're having this consistent weight loss because baby's just getting like micro doses of colostrum, which is high in fat, which makes them survive. And of course, like, we're still alive, right, as a species. And I don't think we're going to be going anywhere unless some asteroid like hits the planet or something. So obviously it works, right? Like it's okay for baby to lose some weight, but, generally they don't want baby to lose more than 10% of weight. And I think the big thing I always stress with parents, especially is like in that first week, is not letting baby go more than 3 hours of not eating. Like, and it's hard because like you're like sleepy and you're up every 2 or 3 hours. You're like, my baby slept 3 hours. Like, yeah, it's beautiful. I get it. But like, let's get baby eating until it like at least is at birth weight again. Yeah. Did you have any problems with your little one gaining weight?
No, but because she was so small, it was like feed. I mean, I was on, probably 40 minutes between every feeding because it was taking her so long and I had used the nipple shield and like, her little mouth. And then I also used the INS,
Uh-huh.
the little, what does that stand for? Nutritional system, supplement, SNS, the supplemental
SNS,
nutritional
there you go.
system. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little thing where you put extra milk in it, and it has a tube that then
Very,
goes
very
to the baby's
tiny
mouth.
tube.
Yeah. So when the baby's sucking, they're sucking on a nipple and a tiny tube that it's basically giving them more than what your breast is giving.
Right.
But
And it just uses gravity really
yeah.
to pull the milk in.
And I was in a situation where I wouldn't have been allowed to go more than 2 hours from feeding to feeding. And this is the other thing that
Yeah.
when I first heard before I gave birth that we have to wake the baby up every 2 hours, I was like, what? Nobody tells you this. And honestly, because I was in a birth center situation prior to my birth, that's why I found out, like they were educating us. Most people don't get told that until they have babies. Like, so I think knowing that beforehand was helpful, but then definitely, and then also knowing that it's from beginning of feed to beginning of next feed. So if your feed takes an hour and a half, then that means 30 minutes later you're feeding again. Which is why I feel like we have all these hormones in that first week, and that leads to all these emotional changes. I mean, your breast milk's coming in. We have a lot of the hormonal changes from just giving birth, but also these hormones are there to help us stay awake, because we are really, until baby gains that weight back, our whole job is to just be their milk supply.
Right. Well, and the other thing too, yeah, and I think it's true. Like I try to tell people, I'm like, you have a full-time job in breastfeeding. Like it is an 8-hour a day job. Like when you have a new baby, that's what it breaks down to. There's a cool little.
It's more than 8 hours a day. It's like 10 to 12 on that when they're newborn. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Pretty much. I mean,
there's a fun exercise that you can do where you like do like a pie graph type thing and you break down the hours. So it's like 12 in the morning and then 12 at night. And you're supposed to take out at least 8 for feeding baby. And then, the other 4, it's like, okay, what are you going to do? You got to sleep in there. You got to eat in there, and you got to like take care of other household things. And so it's like, I think it's a really great exercise because it really shows you like how much you actually have to do. Because even if you're feeding every 8 hours, I guess you could divide it during the day. So it's like 4, but still you got to sleep, and eat and like take care of other things, go to the bathroom, shower, all that stuff. So I recommend doing that exercise. But the other thing I tell parents too is that like, when they're on the breast, it's great because they're actually like, it's all about supply and demand. Like that's the bottom line, what it happens. And I did talk to somebody that like exclusively pumped. And she said like, there's a direct correlation between how much she drinks and how much milk comes into the thing. And I thought that was great feedback because when you're pumping, like it's a whole nother reality, right? Like you don't have all those like juicy baby smells and all that stuff,
You mean how much the baby drinks and how much she's pumping?
Yeah, she just strictly pumped.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
she noticed a difference with the fluid intake and like what she ate and stuff like that. Because when you breastfeed, if you exclusively breastfeed and you don't pump, you never know if water is actually, or fluids is actually affecting the breast milk or making it more or less. But she said
Oh, you're talking about the more the mother drank fluids, the direct correlation with the breast milk. Okay.
Yeah.
Not like the more the mom pumped, the more the baby drank.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Sorry. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think fluids are like a really good thing. If you have a partner, I highly recommend like making them, that's their job. Making sure.
Yeah, those gallon jugs are great.
Yeah.
Time.
And people love, I mean, as a home birth midwife, like we don't get it a lot, but sometimes, and they've ordered on Amazon, the hospital cup, like moms love those. They're like the best invention ever, but you can order on Amazon too. You love the hospital cup too.
Yeah. And I love it. Like people like, you can like bedazzle that up and, especially people who do home births, they'll get one of those, or you can easily find them, honestly, get on moms groups or Facebook groups, and people are, once baby is, they're your best friend until you're done with them. And then you're like, okay, move this thing out of here. So they're easy to find for free or pass down too, or you can order them on Amazon. And then put some, people like put some love into it, because you're going to have that cup around you all the time. Like people put positive affirmations on it, or just colors that they like, or whatever it is,
I love it.
pictures.
And the other thing too that I really like wanted to talk about the first week is that I find a lot of mamas are just like very kind of antsy about like getting up and like doing things and kind of getting back into the swing of life. And I just like, it's with my Chinese medical background, it's just so different because their whole take on postpartum is like so different. They do that whole doing the month thing, which we talked about a little bit in the past. But the whole idea is that like we've like carried this baby for 9 months, right? And now we're breastfeeding or even formula feeding. But if we're breastfeeding, like they're taking the most calories from us. So we need more of that. We're recovering from a huge, like, marathon, really. Like even short bursts are 4 hours. That's like if I had to go run 4 hours, I would definitely need some replenishment, and that doesn't even include like the 9 months prior to like actually building baby. And in Chinese medicine, they believe breast milk is like qi, which we get from our food and breathing, and then blood. So like, and it's not really blood, right? It's just like kind of the idea that they're taking the nutrients from us. And that's like very different because they will actually pull from us if we're breastfeeding, right? Like things that they need. So I try to like, one other thing is the whole like beauty aspect of things. It's like if you rest more and take care of yourself in that first week, especially, like really try to rest, just like setting your body up to be better in the future. Because they really believe that like everything, like all of our kind of channels and everything just like open up after birth. And so if we're out like trying to exert ourselves and not listening to our bodies, standing up when we really shouldn't just be lying in bed, taking care of baby and resting, then it causes like damage in the future. You know what I mean? Because it's like extra taking away because we're like extremely open, but also very depleted, right? Yeah. So then it's like this whole kind of, I don't know, effect. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I see it as these stages where it's like exactly what you were saying. You need to, it's hard, and we've talked about this too, from people to mentally shift to like, because breastfeeding isn't seen as the work that it is. Yes. It's hard to mentally shift into, this is my sole responsibility. And again, it's hard to know the marathon ahead of you when you haven't done, it's like going to run a marathon when you've never actually maybe run a marathon before, or like run even long distance. You don't really understand the distance that you're going to have to go here. And so you have to trust in some ways that, and what you said as far as closing, I see them in the stages. It's like not just the first week, but like kind of that whole first month is like, okay, closing these, allowing these energetic portals that have really been blown open to close. And then after they close, you kind of start, and then it's like the integration. Then you get to like, okay, now I'm going to have to integrate this, like these kind of like, these portals have been blown open. There's new energy in there. You're closing it up. And then like the integration part comes next. But to that point, I would also highly recommend, I was just speaking with someone as well, just about this, it can be a really hard shift for the mind to do nothing. And, even though our body can be depleted, so little things like books on tape are great, or, lying in bed with a book on tape is still a great way to rest your body. If you do have, books that you want to read around, baby or parenting, and this is the time to do it before baby's more active and up. And also, she had said she was doing like something like a puzzle. Like there's little things you can do that kind of help, keep you in a restful state. Like, even though I know you're probably of like just be in bed most of the time. Yeah. But if I think, the modern day balance is, my biggest thing is don't let people come in as much as possible. Highly encourage setting those boundaries. And if you're bored in your mind, doing more things like a puzzle, finding some books on tape to listen to, those kinds of things, TV. I see so many people to like lean into the TV, which is great. Like use that TV and movie time to catch up. But
YouTube's
I
great.
also, what's that?
YouTube's great. There's like
YouTube's great. Yeah. I also though hear people say, because it's so easy to do that. And when you're breastfeeding, this is something that comes up, especially you're doing so much breastfeeding and those, it's a shift, right? A big shift, like where you're just so sedentary.
Mhm.
Um, I hear people tell me they do feel depleted or drained. And sometimes I give this experiment of like, let's limit the amount, the times or the amount of time that we're on screens,
Mhm.
especially if you weren't as on them as much prior to, and now you're just kind of like filling the time. So like maybe fill that a little bit more with a book on tape or a meditation you're playing or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, and or just put your phone on record and talk some things out, like a journaling thing.
Mhm.
Or,
Mhm.
but because your hands are so occupied, using it as a way to voice journal. And again, you can just totally delete those later, but that helps you kind of like voice journal, like what's coming up for you, whatever.
Right.
Um, but I
I
think it's
feel
important to have some of these things because it is a very big mental shift to go from,
yeah,
to this sedentary state in our minds,
right.
have a really hard time shifting into that.
Well, and I think you said it best that there's this idea that like breastfeeding isn't work. Like I think that's a well put thing because it's a ton of work like all the time. And especially that first week, like even parents that have breastfed before, like I remind them this is a new baby. When the last time you breastfed, the baby was probably bigger, which means that they're just easier. As they get older, they're like doing like gymnastics all over you. So it's a very different breastfeeding experience than when it's like a newborn and their mouth is tiny and you're trying to get it onto your nipple and like, the whole
Yeah.
thing. So it's like new baby, new learning. Like you have some experience, which is great, but you have to like look at it as like brand new. And the other thing I say too is like be a princess, be a goddess, be a queen, whatever your analogy is, whatever you want to be, like enjoy it. When in our life do we get to be like, can you bring me some water? It's not going to happen. And as a mom, like even yesterday, it's like I'm sitting
I
there
do it
trying
all
to
the time.
meditate. Yeah, all the time. It's like I'm gonna go
It's
meditate
good
for 15
practice
minutes.
for like for the rest of your life. You can get used to it.
Just get used to it. Like even like a 15-minute meditation, I get interrupted. So like
Yeah.
it's like enjoy it. I'm asking you to enjoy just being pampered for 1 week.
Yeah.
Like that's minimum, like 1 week, like enjoy being pampered, enjoy the like not having to do anything at all. Allow, like really trying to get people to like allow themselves that space to just enjoy, and like
Mhm.
and heal. Really, that's what you're doing. But
Yeah, and I want to talk to the people that are in the hospital because there is a way, like I was in the hospital, like I wasn't personally, but my baby was in the NICU. And so I was with her. And even then you can implement things like this, it's like, even then, um, it's, it was shitty. I was sleeping on this shitty plastic sofa next to my child, which I was fortunate enough to do because I was my, first, I only had one, but ask for people, like ask for your partner to like go buy you some food and bring it to you. Like ask, like take the time to sit and, listen to your meditations or whatever. Ask the nurses and you staff, like that somebody told me that and I didn't realize until I got home. They're like, take advantage of it. Have a lactation consultant come every day to you, like
yep.
twice a day. Use all the resources and be
Mhm.
treated like a princess in the hospital. They're there to support you.
Yep.
So whatever it is or wwhatever reason you're still there, you
Yeah.
can do that too. And you can, most places you can 100% have someone come in, like have a postpartum doula come in and like give you a foot massage or some like healing session or whatever it is. So there's ways to work that in when you're not at home too. So just
Right.
bring it back.
I like that. And when you get home from the hospital, you're going to need time to recover too. I think
Mhm.
that's like kind of forgotten. Like you need that extra. Maybe your week one was in the hospital. So that means that you really do need like an extra, I don't know how many days, depending on how you're in the hospital, but
Well,
you need that extra care there too, because you're not fully recovering when you're in a
mm,
hospital on a plastic sofa, right? Like let's
yeah.
just put it,
And
put it, put it out there.
here's the importance too, coming back to that week one, is if you can start to implement this stuff from the get-go, that's setting a good foundation for the weeks and months moving ahead, because it's not going to get any easier. Like,
Mhm.
I mean, it will eventually get easier, but it's not you know, it's not a linear, what do we always say this? It's not a linear path. Like we say this in everything with kids and parenthood and even pregnancy. It's kind of like, I mean, pregnancy is somewhat, but you have your ups and downs along the way.
Mhm.
And it's the same thing with the newborn baby stage. I think the whole first year, it's like it's not going to be a linear path. It's not like week 2 is better than week 1 is better than week 3. Like it just keeps stepping up like that. So the more that you can build a foundation of leaning into your needs and taking care of yourself from the very start, that's just going to
Mhm.
make it easier for the weeks ahead. And when you hit those weeks, months down the road where you're really struggling to like honor your needs because
Mhm.
you've practiced that from day 0, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, that's a good point because I think that's a hard shift when you're going from like, especially like first time parents, like going from kind of having freedom to now your needs are put secondary to your child's in a lot of ways. And that shift, I don't think it's apparent consciously because you're just so entrenched in like everything else that's happening in that first week that it just doesn't really cross your mind that that's like what's happening. But it is. It's like you're basically like losing kind of your identity in a sense because you're now like your all your energy is going to caring for this baby. Why do you laugh?
I remember like this, I think my sister brought this up recently, like we were, I don't know, relating to something, but I think I was about 1 week or maybe it was 2 weeks. And I don't know, 1 or 2, somewhere within the first 3 weeks, I turned to my sister and started crying. And I was like, I feel like I have a ball and chain or like I was on house arrest or something,
Yes.
and it is, it was such an identity shift and it feels like it's going to be forever. And,
Mhm.
um, it was, yeah, like a moment of like, holy shit.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
realizing like, but again, I mean, and this goes into, the more I learn to lean into it,
Yes. Yes.
the better it is. It's like
Yeah.
instead of resisting it, like lean
Mhm.
into it. Like you said, be treated like a princess. Just like
Mhm.
instead of considering it house arrest, considering it like your own personal spa, and like, like make it um as luxurious as you can, and honoring it for what it is. Yeah, the more I leaned into everything, the better it was.
I think that's the big thing is like really letting go and leaning in. Like, I am going to do nothing. Like, my job is to feed this baby. That's it
Mhm.
right now. Like, there's no other expectation, no expectation to like wash dishes or like whatever the
And
case is, clean
to
the house.
really, maybe this would be a great meditation. I think the other part of that is to feel your worthiness in that
Mhm.
too, of like your value and worthiness in doing that, in
Right.
just feeding your baby or being there. Um, because I think that is detached a lot from people. It's like they don't feel like the worth of themselves if they're not doing, like in just being that sole provider for your baby.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah. Because I think even like as you get along, like moms kind of joke too that like, oh, I'm just the milk machine, right? But it's like there's that, especially that first week, like if we don't have that connection, like really valuing like this is my job and I'm making this life of this baby like the best it possibly can. Like it's the most important job in the world, like more important than presidency or
yeah.
some surgeon or whatever. The garbage guy, I appreciate them. But like
You're
having like
creating a human being. Yeah, you're
yeah,
still creating a human being, just like
yes,
you were when you were pregnant. It's almost like
exactly.
just as important now as it was when they were in the womb.
Exactly, exactly. So I think that's why I really wanted to like focus on that first week to just like give that, just really allow for us to just be like, it's okay to do nothing. Like stay off social media. You don't need your
Mhm.
body back in like 4 weeks or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
that's great for those that have it, but like just don't compare yourself. And like you said, like really lean into and let go of expectations and
yeah,
just try to embrace what that first week brings to you as much as possible. And of course, like if you're in a hospital and dealing with other, medical issues, that's a lot harder. And like you're going to have, your mountain's going to be harder to climb than someone that has a healthy baby that they're just feeding at home. But it doesn't mean that we can't, lean into either avenue that life takes us down.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and every path looks different too. I mean, yes. And I heard a midwife once tell me like some people have the blocks in the pre-pregnancy. Some people have blocks in the pregnancy. Some people have blocks in the postpartum. There's usually something somewhere, and
Mhm.
it's um again that comparing thing. It's like just because this person is looking this way in this moment, first of all, they let if that's what they're showing you, there's usually more behind the curtain that we're not
Right,
seeing.
right.
Promise you that. But also knowing, well, yeah, but in the bigger picture, where was their struggle,
Mhm.
because there usually is one. I don't know one person who hasn't had some little moment
Yeah.
along their journey. So
Life is all about struggling, even in birth and postpartum and stuff like that. So for
yeah.
sure. Yeah. And that, I think the other thing that makes that first week really hard is like the emotional changes that take
Mhm.
place.
Do
And
you know the specifics around the hormones in that first week?
yeah, so like basically, after birth, there's like this, or during birth, there's a huge rise in the oxytocin levels, right? So, and I mean, it's high, like because obviously it helps with pain and like it's why we feel so great after generally. So basically by day 3, and of course this is all like general, right? Like not everyone's going to be day 3 because we're all different, but generally those will actually start to not really like dip, but like really drop. The hormonal levels will start to drop. And it's basically a lot of the oxytocin drops. I don't know the other hormones involved, but that's a big one. And oxytocin actually helps with breastfeeding. So like and then also what happens is on day 3, you have that huge, like we call it the day of tears in home birth, which is just like you're crying because your oxytocin levels are just plummeting. And then your breast milk is coming in. So you're just like leaking out because baby's been sucking on your breast, which is great
And
for
because of that, there's a spike in other hormones, right? With the breast milk
yeah,
coming in. Yeah.
exactly. And I can't remember what they are right now. But
Prolactin? No,
prolactin.
I don't. Yeah,
I
I
should
don't
have
know.
looked this up before the call, but
We can put it in the show notes.
we'll add it in there.
Here's all here. Actually, it'd be cool to like create a graph of
That would
here's
be
how your
cool.
hormones like are changing that first week kind of
I
thing.
love that. We'll do that.
Yeah.
I love that. That's good. Yeah. And so you're just like, and then too, like on top of that, like the actual hormonal levels that's happening, also I feel that as like when you're pregnant, there's a lot of focus on you as the mom, like, oh, you're pregnant. And like, there's excitement. And then when the baby comes, it just like drops off and you're like kind of like left out in the cold, like, great. Okay. Thanks. And then now it's all focused on the baby. So not only are you dealing with hormones, you've had this kind of like, emotional type like connection with people and like kind of a lot of happiness and excitement and, just awareness around you. And then that gets completely dropped. And then on top of that, like we're dealing with this like identity crisis of like taking care of a child. And then like partnership is like another aspect of it. So I think there's just like a lot happening in that first week. And it's just so overlooked in our culture.
And the other thing I think as well is it hits you in that first week of like, okay, what just happened? The birth part. Because
Right.
sometimes you're going through birth and a lot of the experiences were half the time just like in it. And
Mhm.
then our minds catch up to it later.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
and our bodies sometimes too.
Yeah.
So
And processing the birth, I mean, yeah, like some people don't do that till later, but there's still like that birth is still fresh,
mm,
in your mind. So, like, and especially if you had, even if you have a nice birth, we've talked about this before, like if we had
we have
expectations.
another episode on birth stories. We can link that.
Yeah. Yeah. Like even if we have a nice birth, then it's still like we could still have expectations that make processing that birth harder. So like
Mm,
during this first week, there's just like so much going on that I think needs to be acknowledged and just like brought into the light so that we can like shift our perspective and thoughts around it so we can have a smoother postpartum period,
yeah.
Yeah, because you know how we feel and how we think affects how we position our bodies, right? Like I talk all the time about it. Like when we're stressed, a lot of times we do this, right? We raise our shoulders up and we don't even know. And we're like sitting there typing. And then 2 hours later, we're like, my shoulders hurt. It's like, well, you're stressed out and you raise your shoulders. And it might not be this huge exaggeration thing, but it's the whole point that like our minds actually affect our body, even if we're unconsciously aware of it. And our babies are so in tune to us, like so in tune that they're going to pick up on this too. So if we can And no, like not to add more pressure, but if we can just start to shift our mind and our perspective a little bit and do like a 5-minute meditation, not a 15-minute, because that's expecting way too much in the first week postpartum, right? But like, oh, yeah, let me do a 5-minute meditation while I breastfeed the baby one time a day. That could be super helpful for your, your whole week and like putting those good practices into place. And then as you move forward, you can extend that out. Like, okay, now I can do 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And
yeah, it's really learning to fill your cup, like that whole thing of put your air mask on or whatever it is when you're on an airplane, mask on before you put on a kid's. It's like, and really practice, like kind of like a fire drill practice of like, you take care of yourself first.
Yeah.
Because if you, for a week, it might, or 2 weeks or whatever, even a month, it might work to like, fill other people's cups or your baby's cup first. But eventually when you're empty and depleted, that's going to do no one good. Nobody will be good around you, especially your child
and I think too, the idea of like that first week, like living in like 15-minute increments, like my life is like living in like 15-minute increments is like really helpful. Okay, what do I have 15 minutes? What can I do in 15 minutes? Because that's really like, it helps, right? Because if you're breastfeeding baby and it takes an hour and a half to feed them and you only have 30 minutes, it's like, it really helps to like break things down into smaller things and check those expectations too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's why. And I think too, just showing up and like
maybe we can create too your little clock diagrams and like even a little video on how you walk people through doing that. That would be
that'd be fun. Yeah. That's a great thing to do, like pre-baby.
Yeah.
During pregnancy. I mean, you could do it too when you're postpartum, but again, that first week can be a lot. So yeah. So that's why I wanted to do the first week specifically, or really like week 1 and 2.
Well, we did fill the time. I think we talked for, I don't know how long we've been talking, 30 minutes or so, a little bit longer.
Perfect.
So yes, I guess you were right. There's a lot to talk about in the first week. Yeah. And I think a lot of this can be extended into the first month, but for sure the first week, because it's setting you up for success. And it is such a big shift. It's that first maternal shift. So anything else you want to touch on first week wise? I mean, the only other thing I want to mention here, I know we haven't really talked too much about nutrition, is nourishing your body. Like, again, like I always like to look at the physical, emotional, personal, and relational. And so like you can look at all 4 of these areas and how you're like, literally ask yourself, how did I nourish myself? Or like, how can I nourish myself more in this area right now? Whatever that means to you. But talking about the physical, the food and nutrition, do you want to just really quickly talk about that first week? And because I think what we consume in general, whether that be a podcast or, what we're, reading, what we're eating. I mean, I'll put in my 2 cents here. Like you were saying, stay off social media, this and that. Like, I think also, when I say like, listen to an audiobook, I specifically say audiobook versus podcast, like find something that's going to nourish your soul. Because I think the less static we have around us, especially around online parenting groups, things like that, there's a lot of different things being said. And it's just more noise in a time that we really should be quiet in those first weeks, because we're so intuitively connected, and that will distract us from that connection. That's my opinion there. But you can talk on that. And then also I'd love for you to touch on nourishing your body really quick before we wrap this up too.
Yeah. So I'll do the nourishing the body first. I mean, the main thing, at least from, again, Chinese medical perspective, is warmth. So they don't believe in raw. Like, you're not supposed to drink cold beverages, not even really supposed to, like, if you're going back old school, like brush with like cold water, that type of thing, wash your hair, shower. It's a whole nother topic. But for food wise, definitely warming foods, like soups, bone broths, like things that are going to like really nourish you and build up that blood supply is what they call it. So like collagen, that's why they want the bone broths. And then you want your nutrient dense foods. Eggs, I think, are also great because they're just high in nutrients. And an egg is so easy to eat. It takes like 2 to 3 minutes to cook up, or even hard boiled and pulled out of the fridge, which is not the best. But, add a little salt or pepper because that actually balances out the coldness, right? So if it's cold, maybe pull it out of the fridge for like a few minutes before you eat it and add some pepper to it. So like the pepper kind of warms up the cold aspect of the actual refrigerated egg. But yeah, and I also think too that like we should also consume some food that makes us happy, like talking about that whole like nourishing our soul. And I'm not saying like go to town on like, a thing of like candy, like a bag of candy, but like, really try to find nutrient foods that like sound and taste good. For me, after I had my son, I wanted, which is like one of my favorite foods is like eggs with feta cheese and dates. Like that was like what I craved. So like that just like filled me up nutrition wise first, maybe not the best, most nutrition dense thing, but like it also filled me up and made me really happy. Smoothies are great too.
Eggs
Again,
with feta cheese and dates sounds pretty healthy.
so good.
If you want the eclair, I give you permission to eat the eclair. So, yeah, like that's your like treat.
Okay, fair enough. What's a treat? It felt so good. I loved it. But like, I think a big thing too is like lunch meats, things that we weren't really supposed to eat when we were pregnant, sushi, that type of stuff. Like if you're craving, like if you're craving those things, I would say like really try to listen to your cravings, especially if it's not extremely unhealthy. And bring a little bit of that joy into and comfort into your day too, but try to make sure you're getting your nutrient dense foods.
Yeah. And really quickly on that too, like going back to the body thing, get used to listening to your body and honoring it is what I would say, because it is very easy with our society to be like, oh, like get your body back in shape. I don't know. It's just, it's the subliminal messaging is all around us. And you're burning so many like milk production burns so much calories, like way more than people, like I had no idea.
More than pregnancy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it burns insane amount of calories. So you will likely be hungry, and honor it and feed your body, like listen to your body as much as you can.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, like lately I've been really enjoying and appreciating just like, like a more, I think in our society, we have this idea of like this like stick figure, like get the 6-pack and be in shape. But like there's something really beautiful about that postpartum body that's like just kind of very supple and like soft. And like you think about it, there's only like a few times in your life that you're going to have a body like that, right? Like it's not like I can be like, hey, Jen, go create that postpartum body. You know what I mean? Like, no, it only happens after a baby.
You can market that, how to have a postpartum body.
But there's like a sense of glow and this like suppleness and this like very, beautiful like curvature that you just don't get when you're not in that postpartum phase. And so I think again too, like kind of leaning in, like when we're talking about leaning in, like really leaning into what is just happening naturally instead of trying to force things to like go a certain way. I just had to say that because I mean,
we should do a whole nother conversation on like food and diet in general for sure. Because I know we both have a lot that we could say there.
And yeah, like I agree with the conception, like our food, our mind, it has a huge effect even on what we eat, right? Like if we're stressed out and we're like stressed about listening to this social thing of like, oh, I can't believe you're doing that to your baby or whatever, like people's opinions, especially that's the other thing, postpartum, like people's, I don't know if you felt this way, but the words that people use to you postpartum are like, they affect you like so much more deeply than when you're not in this like postpartum state, especially that first week. Did you feel that at all?
I didn't, but I feel like I did a very good job of protecting myself. And I was getting a lot of that already in my pregnancy because my child was small and all these, trust me, I was getting like a lot of like, you shouldn't listen to your intuition feedback. So I think I created that habit of being like, a boundary, an energetic boundary of like, these are your opinions. This is my intuition. From that was my journey. I see exactly what you're saying. I see so many people that are, it's like you're saying, you're blown open and things can come in just, and you are tender and like, don't put anything nourishing around you or near you. And that is why, like, just generally, it's better to just not consume media or have people around, anything that like that is, if you even have any idea that they might not 100% fill your cup, then just like don't even have them around, kind of, or bring it into your ears or your eyes or whatever.
Totally. And I think the other thing too that I tell that it's important to like note is like with our parents, like, you know, our parents, so our kids' grandparents, there's always like so much that they I feel like in general, again, not everybody, opinions. And I think a big thing to like to that, and I think this is like the best saying is you've had your chance with your kid and now it's my turn to do what I want with mine.
And it's not even about chance to me. It's more like that was your like that dynamic and experience was exactly what it was meant to be.
Yes.
My experience is my own to create with this being and child. And whatever relation, like you are the parent, you are the one. And again, just coming back, like you are so connected to that child in that first week, especially. I mean, it is like they are like pretty much still in the womb if they could be. Like they're, you know, they want to be there. So your energetic connection to that child is so deep that if you know what's best, you know. So
yeah, you know, exactly. You know what's best. And that goes back to listening to your body, like listening to your intuition and trusting that too. Yeah. So going back to that protection of like social media and stuff, I totally agree. Be aware of what you feed your mind, body, and soul, especially during that first week. I mean, anytime really, but I think just especially that sensitive period. Yeah. Do you have anything else?
No, I think we covered a lot. I think this is good. I think this is good for today. We'll expand on some of these topics. We'll create some of these cool graphs.
Yes, I'm excited, actually. I'm really excited. I'll do the hormone one for sure. And the pie chart's cool. I think we should definitely do a pie chart and like include the 4 categories, like you said.
Yeah.
And with like different colors or something. That way you can actually see if you're, you know, if you're kind of, nothing's going to be in balance all the time, right? Like balance is based on a lot of aspects. So of course your self-care is going to be diminished immediate postpartum compared to like mine where my son's 6, right? Like just going to have more time to do self-care. But, you know, you still want to be able to make sure you're getting at least a little bit of each category into your day. So I think it'd be fun to do. Cool.
Yeah. Awesome. All right.
Hey there, amazing listeners. We just want to say a huge thank you for tuning into our convo on the Just This podcast today. We appreciate each and every one of our listeners, and your continued support means the world to us.
If you enjoyed this episode and found value in it, we would be incredibly grateful if you could take a moment to leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform or share this episode with someone you think would enjoy it too. Your reviews and shares not only motivate us, but they also help others discover our show.
We're also all about keeping the conversation going and hanging out with our incredible community. Head over to justthis.site, that's justhis.site, where you'll find additional resources, ways to connect with us, and join the conversation, plus some more goodies.
Thank you again for being a part of the Just This community. We'll be back soon. Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and embrace the wonder as you navigate this extraordinary adventure.